Welcome back. So we were talking about where do we start our video series and what should it be about? And really you kind of have to, I think in anything, you have to go back to the beginning of what creates the foundation of a relationship or a marriage. And there's a lot of psychology involved, which it's funny, I didn't know this. Jolie didn't know this when we first got married. In fact, we met, do you want to tell them when we met?
What do you mean, like when, like date?
Yeah,
wise?
like, or just like what, where were we?
Are you kidding me right now?
I don't know. It's interesting, and maybe, I don't know.
Well, which part? The first, like, introduction, or like how you basically stalked me after you drove me home?
Yeah, I was pretty intrigued. I've always been pretty goal-directed, and that was back in grade school, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
We were
sure.
kids.
Yeah, we were 3 and 7.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Not good in maths.
No, yeah. So, yeah, we met in college. And the challenge with that, quite frankly, is as we get into what creates a foundation relationship, there was some sense that we had that we didn't know. And there's a lot of sense that we didn't have that we had to navigate through. And
there's some parts that just don't change because it's kind of inherently who
right,
you are.
Right.
So.
That's accurate. That's accurate. So let's talk about the mindset around marriage. And if you look at if you think about it, like typically when I grew up and you grew up, people just got married, right? Like they just went ahead and got married, and then they had kids because that's what you do.
It's
what you do. You're supposed to do it. And really, I didn't know at that time. I didn't even know anyone that questioned it.
Right. And there weren't many people getting divorced either.
No, the divorce rates climbed over time, and now it's become something almost like, I'm not saying it should or shouldn't be considered, but it's become part of the culture, right? With over, I don't know, this latest statistics, I think it's over 50% of folks that are getting divorced.
More in some places too.
Yeah, and so, but we've also seen people stay married in our lives that probably shouldn't, and watch them suffer in that relationship too, as well. And one of the questions I think you'd ask yourself as someone of a viewer is, what do you believe about marriage? And then what do you believe about relationships? Mm-hmm. And what's it for and why? So like if you were someone to ask you on the spot, which I'm doing right now, what do you think the benefit is of being in a relationship as opposed to being single? Because I think you also said to me before, like if something happened to me, you would not be in the hunt.
No.
Right?
No.
So tell me what it is from your perspective of what a relationship provides of having as opposed to not having one.
Well, I think you have to feel complete with yourself first. And then you find this other person who hopefully feels complete as well. And when you have two wholes come together, it just kind of enhances everything that's there. So I think in that regard, a relationship brings a fullness to life, or hopefully it brings a fullness to life. There's obviously going to be a little bit of security, I guess, or some comfort knowing that you have somebody who can share the ups and downs and sideways things that happen in life. Yeah. Hopefully you can manage that on your own. You don't have to be in a relationship to do that, but it's kind of nice to just have that other person who's there, who's kind of like your touchstone or the person who you can go to in those moments of perhaps potential crises or elation and joy that you can share that with.
Yeah.
So I guess that's
good. I think it's some really good perspectives. In fact, I think about when I got hired at 3M, and then I had lost the job because they sold the division. So now I'm looking for a new gig, and this is back in the AOL days. I still, that's part of, I was thinking about that. We had, in the guest room, we had that computer.
Yeah, we had a computer.
Yeah. So you couldn't use the phone when you're on the computer because it was on the phone,
it was
right?
Dial-up.
Yeah, and you get to hear that noise when they started exchanging.
Now you know what that noise is. If you're a certain age, you know that noise.
And if you don't, then hey, sorry, you have to ask your parents. And so we go online, and because we're looking for opportunities, and there's this opportunity that presented itself in the Seacoast, in New Hampshire. And so Jolie pulls up pictures, and you're like, this is awesome. We need to move. And she felt it in her gut, which is something we'll talk about intuition later on. And so we looked at it, and then I interviewed for it, and I got offered the job. And I was scared shitless because I had never, and you had never, moved away from home. ever. Like our whole home is in West Michigan and Illinois.
Right.
And why would you move away from your family and your friends? I mean, that doesn't make any sense. Mm-hmm. But if someone were to ask me, like, what are the top 3 events that occurred in your life that probably had the most impact, that was one. And I can say for certain, for me, that I would never have been able to do it if you weren't there. Like, because I just couldn't do it. Like, I didn't have enough to make it happen. Mm-hmm. And then so Jolie had so much conviction about the whole situation and how it was going to be good, and that played a big dividend for me and allowed it to occur. So that's an illustration of, I think, what you're talking about there from my perspective. You remember that?
Yeah, I do. Yeah. I remember seeing Portsmouth and going, yes. Like, it was like a full body, like, this is where we need to be. And here we are 22 years later.
Here we are. And we talked about moving back, and now no way in hell. So,
we have a summer home there.
Yeah, that's right. Now we have a summer home there. So we still go, but we, go when we want to go. That's right. And so it's all good. And there's a lot around that move as well, because we had changed friends and that whole experience.
Well, not necessarily changed, but gained a few, lost a few, and kept a few. Right?
That's right. Yeah, that's true, which is a normal progression. And in fact, we will do a future video on social life, because that's a really interesting thing to talk about, right? That can create a lot of interesting dynamics in a relationship.
Sure can.
So values and vision are the key of the core of the relationship foundation. And there are things that we both value, and there are things that we both want to drive towards. But there have been times when, for example, we had a vision of how we wanted to live. Like, that hasn't really changed all that much. Mm-hmm. Like, we had a visual representation of how we wanted our life to look and feel, and experiences we want to have, and choices we want to, right? Mm-hmm. So freedom was a big driver for us from the beginning, right? We wanted to have freedom. However, there were times when we thought we'd access that freedom through a career.
Right.
And there were times when, I remember a specific situation when you were working in management and I was working in sales, and I wanted to get into management, and you had your trajectory and I had mine, and they were not aligned geographically. Do you remember that?
Vaguely.
Yeah. So, in fact, part of yours would have to go to, like, you eventually have to move. And I remember this whole conversation. Yeah. And the root of the conversation, this point to put out is, and it was tough for me to understand, but I looked at it as, well, if I make more money than you do right now, then I should be more important than you.
Right. Okay.
And that was a problem. Do you want to talk about that?
Well, as a strong, independent woman, you can imagine that would be a problem, because I'm like, well, screw you. I could do this with you or without you. And I don't know, that was a pivotal piece where we were like, that's it.
Yeah.
But you have some pretty colorful conversations when things like that happen, because it starts to, like, you start to feel like your partner views you as less than, which sucks.
Yeah.
Or what you want to do with this life, because if you go back to the traditional model, like your mom worked, but like did. For some people, they get married, maybe they have a career, and then they have a family, and then there's one person who's responsible for the household and the kids, and maybe they work and maybe they don't, and it happens today too.
Right.
But I think we're maybe a little more conscious or aware in today's age than maybe we were back then.
Yeah.
But yeah, we had some pretty powerful and colorful conversations about that, because, like, well, what do you do? Especially if it involves relocation. Like, that becomes really interesting, because how do you make the distinction?
Yeah.
Of what's important or what you should do or shouldn't do.
I totally agree. And as I'm listening to you, my mind keeps jumping ahead, which is not a good form of active listening. I'm just being frank on you on that.
Typical.
But it's typical, yeah. Jolie is very much in time, which is in the present moment most times. And I'm very through time, which means I'm constantly thinking about what's next in the future. So I'm the guy who's looking at the playlist and must leave the concert before they're done, so that we don't get stuck in a parking lot situation getting out. However, I owe Jolie the end of a Cure concert, and
so, you heard it here, people. That next tour to the end.
I do. So
those of you who know us know.
She will not let me let that down. So, Jolie was talking about the love, security, and self-esteem aspect earlier. You might have heard some of those terms. And this is really important to understand. Those three primary needs, love, security, and self-esteem, those three, at the core root of what we need to really own ourselves. If I love myself at a low level, or my self-esteem's low, what I will do as a human is I'll work extrinsically in relationships and create a dynamic that is dysfunctional with someone else to augment my lack of self-esteem, or augment my self-love, or augment my lack of security. And for us, one of the ways that manifests for us is around actually, especially younger days for sure. Back in college is what I'm thinking, but and it still existed past that. Is I had this huge jealousy issue, right? Which is around security and self-esteem. Though it might seem like I don't trust her. On the outside, you say, well, gee, you don't trust Jolie, that's your problem. It wasn't that. It was my own issue. And it's not like, oh, and I shouldn't be trusted. That's not it either. It was a manifestation of my lack of security and a manifestation of my self-esteem. And until that elevated, that's what solved the problem. And I think sometimes people focus on the wrong thing to solve the problem. There was some interesting ways I responded to that over the years. One in particular, at the club. You remember that one? Yeah.
Well, and it's particularly a problem when the girl that you're dating at the time has more guy friends than girlfriends, which is also like a really interesting dynamic when you have a jealous boyfriend.
Yeah, that's true.
You spend a lot of social time alone. Like, you go to your party, I'll go to my party, we'll come back together later.
That's accurate.
That was the best way to have a good time.
Yeah, it was in college. We did a lot of that. Yeah, we kind of worked around some of our challenges, but
you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah, to our own benefit though, right? But praise God for that. So as you look at your relationship, what I recommend you do is, or look at yourself, I should say, is pay attention where you're at in love, security, and self-esteem. And I'll ask clients, scale 1 to 10, where are you? And just gut check on that. That's a good way to calibrate it. And one thing we realized for us is that our levels of consciousness, which drives our awareness and how we look at life and who we are, has elevated over time. And what can happen is somebody changes their level of consciousness over time, like indirectly. They work. Basically, what happens is you work on yourself. That's right. You work on yourself. You become more aware. You accept responsibility. You develop. What ends up happening at times is the other person doesn't, and or people grow.
See how it points to me how that happens.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Else I point to. I can point to myself, I guess. The other person doesn't.
No, but it's true. Yeah, we said that in the first video. He was always big on.
That's accurate. But there were also times when Jolie, when she started pursuing yoga, here's like, think about beliefs, right? There's beliefs about money we can talk about. There's beliefs about, faith, and beliefs about how the relationship should work, how someone should behave in the relationship. They're all beliefs. They're all illusions anyway. But there are times when as I was raised as a Catholic, and so was Jolie, but she was able to see things in a more grand scale than I was. And I got really zoned into like, this is right and this is wrong. And Jolie wasn't that way. But that created conflict until I saw it differently, which took quite a while. And it created issues in regards to like, well, why are you doing that? Or why are you going here? And that doesn't make sense to me. And you're going to burn in hell for that or whatever. Right? Well, I may not have said that. But
some people might.
Yeah, there are things that happen that really, if you think about it, don't make a lot of sense, but people behave that way like it's reality. And these are all choices and all illusions. And if we're going to make choices or illusions, so I always say, then let's make some that are empowering instead of others that are disempowering. So I'd like to give you some homework, something to activate, to do.
Well, I was going to say the 5 love languages is a good piece that we should bring up.
That's true.
Because if you're looking at like your relationship and how to make it a little more whole and how to understand your partner, maybe we'll dive in. My overstep?
Yeah, no, not at all. I think you're right. Tracy Chapman wrote a book.
Was it Tracy Chapman?
I know. Tracy Chapman wrote a song.
Yeah.
Yeah, really good song.
Great album.
Yeah, and the song was...
that first album.
What was the song that she sung? Fast car. That's what it was.
But maybe Tracy Chapman
Yeah.
wrote the book too. Different Tracy Chapman.
Gary Chapman.
Gary Chapman.
Gary Chapman. See, I knew it was a Chapman. But if you want, maybe you could listen to Tracy Chapman.
There you go.
When you read Gary Chapman.
Just
Boom.
in the background.
So the 5 love languages, won't go into it. Just get the book if you don't have it. It's a great study, but there is something that we learned from that book.
Well, yeah, absolutely. Well, basically, like your partner may do things with all the good intentions, and because they have certain ways to kind of express their love for
Yes.
you. And if it's not the way that you want to be loved,
Yep.
it could be potentially irritating. And I can think of one example because it was probably you being jealous or something when we were in college that was annoying.
You're going to say stupid.
I was, but my daughter
Yeah.
won't let us
Okay.
stay stupid.
All right.
But I remember we had a little argument, and I was working, and I was like, whatever, do what you gotta do. And I came home, and my apartment was cleaned. I still remember this.
Oh,
And I'm like, what the fuck, man? Like,
Yeah.
why are you cleaning my apartment?
yeah.
Like, what's going on? At the time, I didn't realize, and now looking back, I know that one of Chris's love languages.
Yeah.
Acts
It's
of service.
acts of service. And so that was a big one to me. And so I figured, I did some stupid stuff. So, like, I'll make it up. I will show her how much I love her by cleaning her place, which doesn't work because her love language is quality time. See the problem? What's required for you to connect with the other person is really important, and we'll talk about that on future videos. But if we're not feeding that, Jolie's absolutely right. Then we're missing the boat, and that's a really good book. There's one I read a long time ago, and I don't know if I'd reference it now or not because I haven't read it in so long, and I remember what it said. But the His Needs book.
Yeah. His needs, her needs.
Oh yeah, His Needs, her needs. That's
Which
what
is
it was.
bullshit that she
Yeah.
was put second, but
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I didn't read it.
who wrote that book?
I have no idea. Couldn't tell you. I don't know if I'd recommend that one honestly because I don't remember it, but I do remember reading it.
But the 5 love languages, I think it's a great one to check out because you can help understand yourself a little bit better, maybe understand your partner a little bit better, and if you want to fill up their cup, as our
Yeah.
daughter also likes to say, she likes to say, that just filled up my cup.
She does. Yeah.
Yeah.
She doesn't get that from me.
No. But it's a great way to just kind of augment or lead into what Chris is going to mention about your homework assignment.
Yeah. So we'll try to give you something to do every time we're here. So maybe something to think about and then something to do with it if you want to. So you can do this one whether you're in a marriage or a relationship or you want to be in one.
Right.
So if you don't, then that's cool too. I guess then you don't need to do the exercise.
Well, that's not necessarily true because we've talked to people who wanted to be in relationships, and it was kind of the same thing. Maybe it's not 3 things, but it was a list of things that they want in their potential
Well,
partner.
I'm saying, but if you don't want a potential partner,
Oh,
though,
okay. Yeah,
right?
don't
You
do
want to
it.
be alone, then why bother?
Right, push stop.
Yeah, that's what yeah, you can stop now. You probably haven't watched this far anyway. So the first one is why are you in a relationship? Like, what do you get out of the relationship? Why you're in a relationship? That's the first one. If you're not in a relationship, why do you want to be in a relationship? Is it because you need to be? Oh, that's a problem, right? Second one is what are 3 things that you love about the other person? And the augment to that is the parallel to that, if you're not in a relationship, then 3 things that you would like to say you love about the significant other, right? And then the last step is to let them know. Tell them, right? Sit down with them, tell them. We'll give you an exercise that we used at one point to kind of, we're going to actually have a video on what you exactly need to do if you want to pull apart in a relationship. I'll give you some of the recipe of that. And then we'll also talk about what you can do to fix it and an exercise that we created around that as a step in that right direction. But tell them, right? So tell them. And if you don't have some that, they say, hey, write it all out. And then your homework would be to read it on a weekly basis so that you can really just get into the zone. Because remember, we attract who we are. I think that's one thing to close on. We attract who we are. And we have to pay attention to that. Because if we're operating at a certain frequency, we're going to attract other people. And I always tell people, if you had a crappy or shitty relationship, do not get in another one.
Right.
Work on yourself, because at your level of consciousness, you will attract someone else who will fulfill your dysfunction, and you're screwed.
Yeah.
Well, not screwed, but you'll be unhappy, and you'll end up getting divorced again, or whatever happens.
Right. And when we also have talked to people about you attract who you are, not who you want, because the
Yeah.
person who you want is probably not going to be up for what you got going on. If
That's
you've
right.
got some dysfunction happening
That's
in
right.
your world, they're
Yeah.
going to be like completely away from that. And as Chris just said, you'll probably attract the same kind of person that you have been.
Yeah. So with that, we thank you for watching. And if you have any comments, send them our way. Any questions, feel free to reach out. And if you want to see any other topics, make sure that table up, we'll banter on. Chris at chrisyonker.com. And no, we are not going in the future. If you say, well, maybe could you guys script these better? And no, it doesn't work for us. So we're just going to come in with an outline and
we'll
provide what we
dialogue.
can. And that's it. And one take is our rule. One take.
Yes.
You deserve more than that, but it gets, it's
It's inauthentic after we
Yeah.
do 2 or 3.
That's true.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you for
Thanks.
watching. For more information, go to www.chrisyonker.com. That's ChrisYonker.com.